everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, and what a great show we have lined up tonight. I am joined by my regular co-host, George Eichorn. Glad to have you back, George.
Good to be here, Scott. Thanks again.
And I couldn't be more delighted than to have this guy on here, Kevin Rand, who's been a long-time friend of mine. We go back to our days with the Fort Lauderdale Yankees. We became friends in 82, and I'll tell you what, we worked together from 82 to 84 in Fort Lauderdale, and our paths have definitely crossed throughout the years. Kevin, thanks for being on the broadcast tonight. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Oh, Scott, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So, all right, let's do a little bit of reminiscing here. As we mentioned to you, George and I did the Sports Exchange in Michigan, and we did it for quite a few years, and now I'm doing it here in South Florida. But, again, I have a lot of great memories in South Florida. And first for some of them about our time with the Fort Lauderdale Yankees. Let's reminisce a little bit about our days with the Fort Lauderdale Yankees and some of the players that came through and the relationships that we met during our time together there, Kevin.
Yeah, it was a special time for me. I mean, obviously that was my start of my career in baseball. I got the opportunity to be the head athletic trainer for the Fort Lauderdale Yankees in 1982. Had Stump Merrill as my manager, who later managed the New York Yankees, and obviously met you during that time, and it just had some great memory. I mean, the Yankees, we had some really fine players. Obviously, Scott Bradley on the 82 team went to the big leagues. Bob Tewksbury pitched and had a pretty long career in the big leagues. And, actually our 83 team had quite a few guys in there. Plunk and Jim Deshays and Ray Fondo and some of those guys. They all got to the big leagues. Dickie Scott got to the big leagues, albeit just he's kind of like the Moonlight Graham, got there. But, only played, I think, a game or two with Oakland, but of course he's had a long career in baseball. So it was quite a special time. A lot of great friends, a lot of great memories.
I'll say one thing about Ray Fontenot, too. If there's ever a theory when you talk about and some Merrill and I used to talk about this, about a left-handed pitcher having a longer leash to make it to the big leagues, Ray Fontenot definitely exhibited that. If you're a left-handed pitcher, the odds of you getting to major leagues is pretty good if you have halfway decent stuff. Won't you agree? Because Ray Fontenot definitely was able to utilize that southpaw to get to where he needed to go.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, I used to tell my players, especially the guys that got a little bit older in AAA, and they were, kind of at that point where they were ready to kind of give up their career. And I'd be like, as a pitcher, you never should give up your career until they tell you can't pitch anymore, because you can always go home and work for the next, 20, 30 years. But, all you have to do is come up with one pitch and have it become dominant. And the next thing you know, you've had a, 10-year major league career. I mean, a guy like Ron Guidry was a case in point. He was about ready to call it a career when he, developed a slider with Sparky Lyle's help. Next thing you know, he went to the big leagues. I think he was at the age of about 27, 20 years old. And shoot, he had a dominant career in the, in the late 70s and early 80s. So, I mean, it was just, I couldn't agree with you more. Lefties, I think, do get a little bit longer leash than right-handers, but nevertheless, just in general, a pitcher can just come up with one trick pitch. Maybe he comes up with a split. Maybe he learns to command a slider, or comes up with a dumb changeup. And the next thing you know, he's making a lot of money.
Amazingly enough, I did a YouTube video at the site of the old Fort Lauderdale Stadium on Lockhart Stadium. And you know what? Kevin Rand was the first one that actually liked it. And obviously it brought back some incredible memories, didn't it, Kevin?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, I had a lot of great memories there with the Fort Lauderdale club. Later on, I used to work what was Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford's fantasy camp, Heroes and Pinstripes, and I used to be there quite often with them and a lot of old Yankee friends, because I worked for them for 11 years before moving on in my career, and I got a chance to reunite with them quite often doing that, and it was just always great to go back to that ballpark to where kind of it had all started, and it did have special memories.
Yeah, how do you forget your starting roots? I mean, that was the first ballpark that I was actually a beat writer for anybody and learned a lot of my lessons, too. Stump Merrill used to treat me like his own players. I remember I had a tape recorder that broke down in the middle of the interview. My photographer ended up giving it me, and Stump treated me like his own. He did the whole interview over again and didn't even care. I saw Stump Merrill a couple of years ago up in Tampa. And, we reminisced about that and everything. It was just unbelievable. But, he treated a young reporter like me, like he did his players, and he had a tremendous amount of patience. And I'm sure with it being your first gig, that Stump Merrill never lacked patience. He wasn't afraid to drop the hammer on his players, but that was his job. But we'll talk about your experiences of dealing with Stump Merrill.
Well, because he had been, he was a good friend of mine. I had met Stump when I was in college at Bowdoin College, and he would come back in the off seasons, actually work with the football team as a coach there. And I got to know him there. That's first time I met him. And then, of course, to go to work with him in Fort Lauderdale, he saw me. He knew I loved the game of baseball and saw potential in me. He treated me like his own son. And always treated me like his own son. And in fact, he was one of the best men at my wedding.
Really?
When I got married, a few years later, obviously. But I talked to him. In fact, I just talked to him last week, just check on him. I check on him quite frequently, just to make sure everything's going well, and he's doing extremely well, and just continues to be a special friend.
Yeah, he definitely treated me like one of his own. So, yeah, George, that's a relationship that Kevin and I had. It was a great feeling with some of the, like I said, Rex Hudler was a guy. I spent time with Brian Butterfield. Tim Burtz is a guy that in your neck of the woods, George, up in the Clarkston area. The list goes on. And, I think when people realize.
Well, that's great. Those are great memories. And I know that the old stadium was demolished, wasn't it, in the late 1990s? Fort Lauderdale?
Well, it was actually demolished recently in the last year or two to accommodate a soccer team there. So it definitely held on to spring training for a while.
Okay.
But that's where the formulation of that video. So, Kevin, obviously, why don't you talk about your road to Detroit? I know that you won a world championship with the Marlins, connected with Jim Leland, Dave Dombrowski. But let everybody know about the road to Detroit.
Well, I was very, very fortunate during my time. Obviously, the first 11 years I spent with the Yankees. Going back to Fort Lauderdale, my first team physician was Dr. Dan Cannell, and Dan Cannell whose son later became a quarterback with the New York Giants. Was a very special person and very close friend with Mr. Steinbrenner. Obviously I got a chance to work with him. Well, when the expansion team went into Florida in 1992 and 93. Dan Cannell became the team physician, and it gave me an in, which was very, very helpful. Obviously, I got the job as the assistant trainer with Larry Starr, and Larry had won world championships with Cincinnati in 75, 76, and also in 90. So to get a chance to work with him was very special, and obviously reunite with Dr. Cannell was great, and that's where I met Dave Dombrowski. Dave hired me there, and I enjoyed thoroughly working for him, and we obviously did pretty well. I was there for the 9 years until the ownership transfer went down. We won a World Series in 1997. Unfortunately, that team got broken up. I think would have done extremely well because we had a lot of guys on the front end of contracts that would have been really, really, really beneficial contracts at the end. And obviously we had won, and I think we would have continued to win. I think it would have been a really special time there, but unfortunately they didn't let that happen. But in my case, it worked out very well. When Dave went to Detroit, 2002, he brought me along in 2003 to Detroit as the head athletic trainer, and obviously we put together a real nice run of. I was the head athletic trainer there for 15 years, so I decided that it was time. 25 years in Major League Baseball, it was pretty good. I still work. I'm the senior director of medical services for the Tigers, but I've kind of scaled back a little bit. I'm not the head athletic trainer and traveling all the time like I used to. So it was a great segue for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. Wayne Huizinga, I believe, was the owner of the Marlins at the time, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Right. So
he sold it to John Henry, and John, of course, John Henry took that group over until he had the chance to buy the Boston Red Sox, and that was when the ownership transfer went down. Jeffrey Lurie went down, and I actually went to Montreal for 1 year as the assistant in Montreal in 2002 before coming to Detroit.
Wow. Yeah, Wayne Huizinga certainly wasn't afraid to put his money where his mouth is. Wayne Huizinga. Of course, he was the first owner of the Florida Panthers as well, and of course, to bring a championship to South Florida. In fact, it's amazing with all the losing that the Marlins have done. That franchise does have 2 world championships or whatever it's worth. So, with that said, let's go ahead and segue. George, you had a bunch of questions you want to go ahead and ask Kevin, so go ahead.
Well, I want to mention too, Dave Dombrowski. We just honored him, Kevin, a year or two ago at the National Polish American Sports Hall of Fame. I'm on the board of directors. It's located in Troy, Michigan, and Dave was selected as the Polish Sportsman of the Year after guiding the Red Sox, of course, to that World Championship. So we were really honored. Unfortunately, Dave, it was during the season. Kevin and Scott, it was in late June. So Dave couldn't attend in person, but he taped a wonderful tribute that we used at the banquet that night. And I just want to let you know, Kevin, he's a heck of a guy. And I know things went sour here in Detroit, but I always admired his work. He's had a hell of a career, and I'm honored to say we honored him at the Polish Sports Hall of Fame with the Sportsman of the Year award.
Wow, that's awesome. He's a great person. I mean, obviously his track record speaks for itself. He's, obviously took over Florida's expansion, won a World Series in the 5th year, took over our franchise here when we were in the World Series in 2006 and again in 2012, and put together an absolutely incredible run. Obviously, probably the best run in Tigers history. And definitely deserves that honor. There's no question. And, he's a special friend. I was fortunate enough to have him as a boss, both in Florida, in Miami with the Marlins, and also in Detroit, obviously. But I consider him a great friend, and have spoken to him obviously when he went to Boston. Talked on many occasions with him, and still very friendly with him and his family. And I mean, he's a special person.
Yeah, he sure is. Getting on another note, obviously, Kevin and Scott. Kevin, can you give us an update? Obviously, we saw the Miami Marlins and the St. Louis Cardinals hit hard with COVID-19. Give us an update from your perspective. Where are we now in baseball? I know those unfortunate situations have occurred already due to maybe a little bit of lax behavior by maybe perhaps some of the players and that, but how are you as far as your thoughts on obviously the Detroit Tigers situation with regards to the coronavirus?
Well, I mean, this is a very fluid, it's a very difficult time, to be perfectly honest with you. And, we're all going through it, we're all learning from it. From the standpoint of testing, I mean, we're being tested all the time, and that's part of the reason. In fact, it is the reason that I am in Detroit presently, because in my job as a senior director of medical services, they had me take over another role, which is called ICPC, which stands for Infection Control Prevention Coordinator. And so my job is to make sure that all the COVID testing is being done on everybody, being done properly, and that type of thing. And, we're getting tested. Our players are getting tested every other day. We're getting tested every other day. Staff people are getting tested 2 to 3 times a week. And it's an incredible amount of work and an incredible amount of money and resources that Major League Baseball has put into this. And we all knew the dynamic was going to be more difficult. I mean, obviously, the NBA and the NHL have done a fabulous job. In fact, I talked to, strength and conditioning coordinator with the Houston Rockets tonight. In life in the bubble, I mean, they're able to do things. They're able to go, they golf, they, go fishing. They're able to do things because they can play in a bubble and they can, and they can do that. We knew that wasn't going to be the case in our situation. There's just no way. You're playing every day. You just don't have that opportunity. That being said, obviously the Marlins situation, that kind of raised some eyebrows with everybody and just showed how quickly those things can spin. I can't comment on the situation with respect to the players. I know the St. Louis situation affected us because the St. Louis situation canceled our games with them. And so all of a sudden here we were playing games, and then we were unable to play 4 games against them. So we had a period of time that we weren't able to play games. We had to work out on that. I've been extremely proud of our players. They've done a great job. They've done, outstanding. I mean, as far as following the protocol as well as you possibly can. But nobody's going to be perfect. And at the end of the day, we all go hold our breath every single day we run COVID tests. Every single one. We hold our breath on that day. All those that are in my position hold our breath till we get those results back. And as I say, we're testing when you think about the volume of testing, because everybody just thinks the players and the staff. They don't realize that we're testing, and when we're testing what are called tier 1, tier 2 individuals, we're testing about 120 people that day.
Wow.
So it's a lot more than what, when people think. They don't realize how much is involved in putting on these games. And, and so, I mean, it's something that none of us had ever thought about going through. I mean, I never in my wildest dream thought I'd be going through what we're going through right now. And the testament I really think is the fact that, we're traveling and we're doing the very best we can.
Well, I mean, I can actually comment on the Marlins situation. I'm on their Zoom calls all the time. Don Mattingly, a guy you're probably also familiar with in the Yankee system. Kevin,
I know Don very well.
Yeah, I mean, the poor guy's befuddled. What he has to go through as a manager is just unreal. I mean, worry about tests every 5 seconds. And of course the Marlins, had their dilemma started in Atlanta, carried into Philadelphia, and then they're out for a long period of time. Then they're being laughed at by all of Major League Baseball. Oh, it's the Miami Marlins, and all of a sudden, boom, what do you got? The St. Louis Cardinals, and he doesn't know what his lineup's going to be. You don't know whether or not the track from I-95 up from Miami up to Jupiter, who's coming and who's going. So, you should see them on the Zoom calls. They're unbelievable. And the Marlins, and then, of course, they're adding players through free agency, waivers, and whatnot, just to assemble a team where you have competitive balance. And every team has to deal with making, they talk about the roster turnover, the taxi squad. The beat goes on and on. You have a shuttle that goes back and forth. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing you deal with, too, Scott, to be honest, and this is the thing that can really hurt, is the fact that, let's say you have a guy that comes or calls you. He doesn't even come. But he calls you and he's got symptoms. You're not going to allow him to come to the ballpark. You don't allow him to come. But once someone tests and they test, then you have to go through the contact tracing. And that can wipe out. So one guy can wipe out 4 or 5 other guys.
Oh,
and they can be wiped out for that day, and they can be wiped out until they're all tested, and they come back. So and that's where when we were discussing the taxi squad situation, what you had to think about is that whoever you put in your taxi squad, you almost have to feel like, hey, I feel comfortable bringing that guy to the big leagues, because it might happen. A case in point, like being the Marlins, and I don't think anybody in their right mind saw, that you'd have 15 people. I certainly didn't think that, but you did think you could have a handful. And the thing was, so focusing on that, you couldn't just focus on from an injury perspective, because this is something totally different. This is one where one guy could knock out 4 or 5. It's not like an injury, where an injury is going to knock out a player. This could be one player knocking out 4 or 5.
Right.
And so it's been kind of a tough situation to manage. And like I say, you kind of hold your breath every day. I mean, you know you're doing the right things. You know you're following the protocols. You're doing as well as you possibly can. But you still have that. When you go and you do the saliva testing on the players, you wait for those results to come back the next day. Pure and simple.
Yeah.
Well, with that said, Kevin, okay.
Yeah.
We talk about the situation with the Cleveland Indians where you had Zach Plesac and Mike Clevenger. You're right. You have wondered, and these guys decided to do what they wanted out in Chicago, and now all of a sudden there's a breach of trust there. And you know what it's like to be in a major league clubhouse. You don't need that kind of stuff going on, because like you said, it's not 1, it could be 5, and all of a sudden games are getting wiped out.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I was proud of Cleveland, to be perfectly honest with you, because they brought those kids in. They had the team, and Terry Francona got that team together, and I know they did that over here in Detroit. And they auctioned those guys out. And I think the guys were hard on them. They said, you can take us all, and that's the thing,
right?
Like you say, they lost the trust of the teammates right there, and they have to earn that back. But it is. It's a totally different situation. Believe me. It's one thing not to be playing with fans. It's another thing to be dodging COVID-19 bullets.
Well, that's what it is. Say what you want. We can laugh about it, but that's the truth. COVID-19 bullets, without a doubt. And you're right. The Indians really definitely took the high road by exiling those guys out and said, you know what? There's a lot on the line. You're talking about their well-being, their family's well-being. And I guess we could just say it this way. There's a huge domino effect in every sense of the word, without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, and you just, like I say, it's difficult. I mean, like I said, I talked to gentlemen with the NBA, and they're wondering. I think they have pretty good protocols in place, the NBA, but as they open it up to the families, that's going to be another interesting dynamic you have to deal with. And we felt that as well. I mean, we go into a city for 3 days, and like we're in Chicago right now for actually 4 games. Well, you can't go. You can't leave your hotel. You can't go play. I mean, that's pretty much what it's all about. And it's difficult.
Well, it's amazing.
It sure is.
Before the season started, I often wondered whether or not you could play these games in both the spring training states, Florida and Arizona. And even though they become hot spots now, at least you kept everybody in a designated area, and you wonder whether that could have worked out if everybody stayed in their hotels. But that's something I don't know we'll ever know that, will we, because of the way it played out. But,
right, exactly. Yeah, we won't know the answer to that one.
Well, that's a hypothetical. So with that said, overall, we are seeing more of the usual amount of player injuries in the short season. Is this about what you expected, though?
Yeah, I would say, we definitely expected more, and I'll tell you why. The thing, I mean, I'm sure there's been a lot made in the last few days about how many pitchers have been hurt. And, the number of pitchers injured in the first 3 weeks of this season, so to speak, versus how many were injured in the first 3 weeks. But the fact of the matter is we had to expect that. If you think about it, spring training is 6 weeks for a reason. You bring the players in, and I know all players through during the time away. Where here they were ramped up for spring. They were 2 weeks away from starting a season, and then they went home and they did their throwing and they did all that to try to stay in shape. But it's not the same, and it never will be the same. And so when they came for our abbreviated summer training that we had, those same pitchers that you need 6 weeks of spring training to kind of build them up. You didn't have that. You had 3. So you knew coming in, now the first 3 weeks of this season are going to kind of take on a little bit further meaning, and it's difficult because it's difficult to try to build guys up when you're competing. It's a little different. It's a little easier when you're in spring training where the game doesn't count.
Right.
And so am I surprised? No. I kind of anticipated that, you see more. I thought we'd see two things. I thought we'd see more arm injuries with pitchers. You just hope they weren't going to be serious. And I thought we'd see leg injuries with position players because I really feel like a lot of times position players don't run enough anymore.
Well, you're talking about summer camp. Even Don Mattingly admitted that with the Marlins.
Yeah.
You got a summer camp of 3 weeks, and like you already just said, it takes you at least 6. So do the math. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out because you're really right on target there anyhow. But
see, everyone wanted to point to the 94, 95, the strike in 94, 95. And when we came back in 1995 for spring, it was 3 weeks. But the difference was you had 140 games that you were going to play. So you didn't have, it wasn't like you're going to play 60 games,
Right.
So
this is a sprint. Yeah.
Right. So it's a little bit different from that regard. You could use those first 3 weeks of that season, even though it started in May. You could use those started right at the end of April, I guess. You could use those first 3 weeks of that season to kind of build guys up. You didn't have to race it. But here, you were going to have to race it. And that's kind of the difference for me. But, it's an unfortunate thing.
Getting back to the Tiger situation, guys, you got Jordan Zimmerman, you got Buck Farmer, you got Ivan Nova, you got 3 pitchers right there that manager Ron Gardenhire had depended on. And obviously Daniel Norris, being on the injured list to start the season, and he's just trying to come back now. So the Tigers, they have felt the brunt of this too, like you mentioned, Kevin, about the pitchers being injured.
Yes, we have. Yeah, we had Dario Algerzal as well, who was one of our guys in our bullpen. By the way, Isaac Paredes just got a base hit, drove in 2 runs, and we're down 3-2 right now.
Oh, really?
So it's his first major league hit with a couple of RBI.
Oh, great! Congratulations to Isaac. Yeah, that's wonderful. The Tigers, of course, just called him up, and that's great for him. So,
all right. So with that,
talk a little bit about working with this current staff here. Okay, you got a lot of veteran coaches. You obviously got a sly veteran manager and Gardenhire. Kevin, tell our listeners about this Tiger staff. Now, of course, you had a savvy manager with Jim Leland, and we all, admire Jim Leland's job that he did here. But Gardy is he's quite a guy, isn't he, Kevin?
Yeah, he's a good fit for these young guys, and that's very, very important. Obviously, I've been very blessed to have worked with some great managers, and Jim Leland was tremendous to me here, not only in Florida but here in Detroit. And we obviously spent a lot of years together. And Gardy kind of reminds me a little bit. I mean, from that standpoint, he's an old school guy, but a lot of that staff is still the same. Dave Clark's here. Lloyd McClendon does a great job. Ramon Santiago plays for us. It's a really, really good staff, and they've shown a lot of patience. And it's not easy sometimes to be patient. Young guys coming up, but they've done a good job showing a lot of patience and giving these guys time. Rick Anderson does a wonderful job with the pitchers, and I think our young guys, the young pitchers that we're calling up now, are going to benefit by his experience. He's terrific, and I think they like I say, they've done a great job, and it's tough. It's not easy. It's not easy when you're you imagine your club isn't ready to really compete. As some of the young guys have their growing pains, and it's not easy, but they've done a great job.
All right, so Kevin, let's go back to the injuries, if I may, for a moment. The Tigers' injury list does have a lot of key players on it. Are there any updates that you can provide with any of these injured players? I know they have a few, but we'll just try to keep it up to date, up to speed.
No, they're all progressing, and they're all making progress. The hard part, one of the hard parts this year as well, and it's probably something a lot of people don't realize, is that the injured players, as opposed to, in the past, injured players cannot stay with the ball club. So they have to go down to the taxi squad. And so in our case, they go down to Toledo to work with our physical therapist, Duncan Evans, down there, and our AAA athletic trainer, Jason Schwartzman. And so they're down there working their way back up to Detroit. So I don't see them at this point in time. Usually that's not the case in a regular season, but during this COVID-19 pandemic, that's the way Major League Baseball chose to run that. And I understand it. It makes a lot of logistical sense, keeping the numbers. Their thought being they wanted to keep the numbers down in the clubhouse and keep the density of those facilities down.
Well, the oddities of the 2020 season. So with that said, great segue, by the way, Kevin. Is the Toledo staff noticing any conditioning issues for the players at Third Bank Field, where a lot of the Tigers prospects are working out? Great segue, though, Kevin.
Yeah, no, they've done a good job down there. Our player development staff, they've kept it fresh. It's not easy to do sometimes, because you think about it, those guys are down there working out every day, and they're, maybe playing some inter-squad games, or maybe doing live BPs, that type of thing, and yet they're not getting a chance to compete against other teams. And that's not easy. You're practicing with no chance to compete. So, they have to find ways to make it interesting, make it fun for the players. And the players down there, though, my understanding, they've done a great job. They worked hard. I went down there when they first started. It was a great setup that Toledo put in place for us there. And, because we have to have the protocols are the same there as they are in the big leagues, and how we have to have, testing rooms, and everybody, we have to have social distancing in the clubhouses, social distancing in training areas, social distancing where they eat, and, testing in isolation areas, that type of thing. So, Toledo Mudhens did a tremendous job working that out, and our guys have benefited.
Let's talk about Miguel Cabrera, a first ballot Hall of Famer, and the way he worked hard this past offseason to get in playing condition this season that he's in. I mean, that to me, Miggy obviously has had durability issues in the past as an abbreviated season. So let's talk about his progress.
Well, Miguel, I couldn't be prouder of Miguel. I mean, he, he's had a tough couple of years. He's had some injuries, had the knee that everybody's aware of, and at the end of the day, I think Miguel. The one thing is great players have a lot of pride, and he has a lot of pride. He has a lot of pride. He has a lot of fun playing the game. It was one of the things I thought was very special about him. If you watch him, he's like a little kid out there playing. He's always joking, always having fun with his teammates, having fun with the opponents, and but he's got, like I say, a lot of pride, and I think he realized last year what went on with his knee, and that I need to make some changes. I'm getting older, and I've got to make some changes, and he did, and he took it upon him. He took it upon himself. And that's a big thing, because we talked to him about making some changes in his program over the years, and he always was great for us from a standpoint of realizing they need to do it. But now I think he realized I need to really do this for me, and he did it. He worked extremely hard. I was extremely proud of the way he came to camp.
All right, George, go ahead.
Well, just as a follow-up, though, I mean, obviously the fans are disappointed. I mean, he's not hitting for average right now, Kevin. And I know You're not a baseball analyst in the sense of, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but that doesn't have anything to do with, like you said, the conditioning, though, does it? I mean, he's just, maybe he's not making the contact like everybody had hoped for. Obviously, he's got a few RBIs. We know that, and home runs. But his average seems to be obviously far inferior to what we're used to.
Yeah, but the thing with that, George, is I look at this right now because I hate to say, as far as from a baseball perspective is concerned, this is almost like spring training, what we're watching right now.
Yeah.
They were out,
True.
they hadn't played. They haven't played. We've played 18 games. It's to me, it's spring training. And so you're going to see guys, that are going to, in spring you see guys that they don't swing the bat very well in spring training, and then all of a sudden when the lights come on and the season starts, it's a different story. He's got 4 home runs. He's got, 8 RBI or 9 RBIs, whatever it is. I think, no, maybe 10 because he had a couple yesterday. But, those guys, some guys, it takes them a little while sometimes to get it rolling. And I think right now what we're watching for the most part is spring training.
I gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. You're right, because it's just like you said earlier, it picked up after this long break and layoffs, and obviously players are going to be a little rusty. They haven't had the competition of live pitching against them, and it is true that there are, and he's not the only one. There's others as well that have been either struggling or pulled a groin or got on the injured list or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you look around the game and you see it. Just look at some of the names that you'll expect, but you'll expect at the end, if we're able to get to 60 games, that some of those things will straighten out, you know what I mean? And, because, track records are track records. And, I just say that. I look at this as, like I say, it's basically spring training until we get about 30 games into it. Spring training's 30 games,
Yeah. And Scott, you know that because you've covered so much spring training in Florida and Arizona.
Yeah, doesn't Kevin know that, right? Every time I'm around, our daily ritual, right, Kevin? Get the interview, take the photo, and a few hugs, talk baseball, right, Kevin? George Eichorn doesn't even know what we go through. Right. That's our daily ritual.
One thing I always knew, George, is that as we went around the circuit during spring training in Florida, at some point in time I was going to run into Scott somewhere. Somewhere along the line I was going to run into him.
Yeah, we knew that, didn't we? Yeah, we come on, Kevin. I mean, didn't see it this year, but then again, I only took in a few games, and they were out in Arizona. But the best part about it is, I think, let everybody know, you live in Lakeland now year-round, don't you?
Yes, yeah. I made when I came to work with Detroit in 2003, I wanted my family to have a, quote-unquote normal family life. We moved to Lakeland, Florida. My wife was from Tampa. So, her family was not too far away. And we had our 4th son right when I got there. So, my 4 boys were young. They were, the oldest at that time was he had just turned 5. And so, It was a great place to raise a family. You know, it was quiet halfway between Tampa and Orlando, and you had every major sport, you know, within an hour either way, and 2 airports, you know, within an hour either way, and it wound up being a great setup for us.
Yeah,
and we still make our home there.
Yeah, George.
And you know what, Kevin? What about the job of being a head athletic trainer? I mean, that's got to be very, very tough job. Not only in baseball, but any professional sport. I've known Mike Abdenauer for a long, long time. Of course, you know Mike too from the Detroit Pistons, and yourself and guys that are in it for such a long time. Scott and I really admire you. I mean, there's so much involved, obviously, to be a head athletic trainer in baseball.
Yeah, it's different. It's a difficult life. I've been great friends with the trainers in Detroit. You know, very closely. You know, Mike is obviously a good friend of mine. Pete Van Zandt with the Detroit Red Wings, good friend. In fact, Pete's funny because Pete sees what the Major League Baseball is totally different because it's every day and it's 162 games in 180 days and you're away from home. You know, I mean, I couldn't have done it obviously without my wife doing the job that she did with my boys. You know, and because she's mom and dad for basically 5 months of every year. She was mom and dad, and you know, April and May until they got out of school, they were in Detroit for June and July, and then they were back in school in August and September. And she was, you know, obviously the one at home those whole times. But that being said, it's difficult. But then what you have to do is when you're home, and you just make sure you're making everything that you can possibly be at. Where you show the kids that, hey, you're the most important thing. It's, you know, I hate missing the time. But at the end of the day, you actually probably spend as much, if not more, time than some people. So,
well, you know,
it is difficult though. A lot of hours. That's the thing. What a lot of people don't see. You know, they're typical 12 to 15 hour days. No matter whether you're home or road. You know, you're in a city for basically 2.5 days because you usually play a day game on a getaway day, and so you really don't get a chance to see the cities at all, or you know, get to do a whole lot. But I always told my wife, we're going around. I said, this is kind of feeling out the different cities and the ones you want to go back to when you retire.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. Unbelievable. Again, amazingly enough, I've been to all 50 states. So by the time when the time does come and I drag my wife all over the place, then I'll know which ones are good, which ones aren't. So I can see your philosophy there. You were talking about Miguel Cabrera. And so let's talk about his presence inside the clubhouse. You have a younger team anyways. How much has he rubbed off on a lot of the younger guys and some of the veterans in there? You know, do they feel in awe to be able to be some of the younger guys around Miguel Cabrera? And how has he been received otherwise?
I think young players coming up are a little in awe just because they know what he's done, but he puts them at ease pretty quickly. And and he's very, very comfortable giving guys advice. He's very, very comfortable, you know, helping players, that type of thing. He's a quiet leader. He leads more by how he goes about his business and how hard he works and that type of thing. And they watch his routines and that type, you know. So, but he does a good job along those lines.
Nothing like having a good mentor. Go ahead, George.
And talking about another guy who's been a long time. This guy here, is he ever going to retire? A guy named Jim Schmeichel.
Jim Schmeichel.
Clubhouse manager. He's been around since...
Jim's been around for a long, long time. He likes to joke with me because he says, you know, I've had five trainers that have retired now. But, you know, he's counting a couple assistants in there, but that's okay. But he likes to say that he loves his job. He loves working. It's, you know, labor of love for him, and the players love him. And he does, like I say, he does great work. He's got great people helping. He's got a young guy, Mark Cave, who does a great job for him and really helps out a lot. You know, and you know, just Jim's a special guy. He's been there a long time. And I don't know. That's we joke about it sometimes because I tell him, I said, you know, you got to relax and enjoy yourself too a little bit. But he's a special guy.
Yeah, he sure is. He's been around a long time. And on a sad note, the passing of Al Kaline, obviously, everybody in the Tiger family, Kevin, and Such a great man. What an unbelievable career as Mr. Tiger.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Believe me, Al was a real special guy. He's treated me extremely well from the first day I came to Detroit. Just the nicest man to be around. Loved talking with him. Great family, Got to know his grandson Colin, who wound up coaching here at Oakland University. I mean, he's just a nice man. And I had some special times with him this spring. Really, it's we'd sit and we had great chats over the years, and he was one of the best at giving me his thoughts, his perspective, but also listening to yours, and just a wonderful person. And unfortunately, when it came to spring this year, for the first time in my life, I looked at Al Kaline and said, he looks his age.
Really?
He had never, ever looked his age. When he was 70, he looked at it and I said, there's no way this guy's 70. Tremendous shape, still working out, doing these things, playing golf and everything. He never had looked his age until this spring. When he came to spring training this year, and he was only there for a short period of time, for about 2-3 weeks early, he looked his age. And in fact, when I had a time, we were playing the Yankees and Reggie Jackson was there. And I got to know Reggie a little bit when I was with the Yankees. And I saw him at the fence, and he asked me about Al, and I said, have you seen him? And he said, no. He says, and I told him that. I said, Reggie, you really need to go see him. He's here. He's up in one of the suites. And he went to see him because I told him, I said, I really don't know. I'm not confident that I'm going to see him again. And, I just felt he was not doing well. And I thought, I just don't know. He was struggling to talk a little bit, his energy level and that type of thing. And unfortunately I was right. He passed, but what a wonderful man.
Yeah, I mean,
and really, that was very nice, Kevin, what you just shared with us. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we talk about, I don't think George has ever been to Tiger Town, have you? George?
Yeah, a couple times, Scott. Long time ago, though.
Yeah.
You'd have to come now, George.
Yeah.
Believe me, the job that the city of Lakeland did for Tiger Town, for Joker Martian Stadium, the facilities we have there are unbelievable.
Yeah.
They did a phenomenal job. The major league side, minor league side, the stadium. I mean, it is one of the crown jewels of the Florida, of the Grapefruit League. It is one of the crown jewels by far. And I mean, you wouldn't even recognize it. It's unbelievable.
In the Grapefruit League, I would actually probably rank it in my top 3. Not counting some of the newer places that they just are, but I would put JetBlue Park and Fort Myers up there. I thought the facility with the Yankees was pretty good, but Lakeland, what they did is unbelievable. And of course,
it really is.
I mean, they have some brand new ones here in the southeastern Florida area, West Palm Beach and Jupiter, but where you have multiple teams. But yeah, Lakeland's definitely. Yeah. So with that said, there's no minor league baseball this year. You and I have minor league baseball routes. How much is minor league baseball missed?
Oh, I think it's missed tremendously.
Yeah.
I think it's missed tremendously in a lot of, especially, in your smaller town, and the places in all the different leagues, that, especially in places that don't have Major League Baseball deal, I mean, obviously they can't go see Major League Baseball this year either, but so all they have is what's on television. But that entertainment, I mean, minor league baseball to me was so much fun and so fan friendly, and I mean, I enjoy it. It would be like not having spring training.
Right.
I mean, how much would spring training be missed? Spring training, so the smaller venues and the major league players, and I mean everything about it. To me, spring training is such a great time of the year. And I think minor league baseball. I mean, I know where I grew up was in Portland. Just outside of Portland, Maine. I grew up in Cape Elizabeth, Maine. Well, the Portland Sea Dogs have been one of the best minor league franchises by far, and I know how sorely missed it is there. I mean, I talk to people up there, and and it's just not the same. And I believe that that's the way it is throughout the country. To be honest with you, I mean, you saw what kind of an uproar was caused when the commissioner said that they wanted to contract 42 teams.
Yeah, I'll be curious.
I mean, look what happened. I mean, you had congressmen, people jumping, and the constituents were extremely upset.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see where that's going to go. Well, amazingly enough, how could a conversation like this go, Kevin, without you and I talking about the Florida State League? You can talk about a lot of the other leagues around the country, but when you talk about judging prospects objectively, and I make sure I use the word objectively, these Class A, advanced Class A's, I should say, Kevin, their stats are definitely not fabricated playing in these major league parks. Don't you agree, since we both lived it?
No, definitely. I definitely agree with that. And I always thought it was kind of interesting. They call high A and low A and that type of thing. And for me, I always thought I would do it there. I put my better pitchers in the Florida State League because those are some big ass ballparks to try to hit the ball out of. Right. And then I put my better hitters down in some of those smaller ballparks in some of those other leagues.
Right.
And, build up their confidence. But you could definitely. I mean, if you had a guy that hit with power in the Florida State League, you knew that guy had power. He, no question, had power. And I think that's still the case, without a doubt.
I often joke around with people.
Minor league baseball is very much missed. I agree with you guys. We got a little team here in Detroit that plays in Utica, Michigan, as you know, Kevin and Scott. Andy Appleby has got this Utica league, obviously, and they're allowing, I think, a 25% capacity. But at least it's a little something. I mean, it's not minor league ball. It's more like semi-pro ball, but United Shore Professional League, I think it's called. But, he's got 3-4 teams playing there. But, the Toledo Mud Hens and West Michigan Whitecaps and Lansing Lugnuts, I mean, we miss them all right now. We really do. And, I know you guys in Florida miss them, but we miss them in Michigan as well.
No, there's no question. I agree with you. And I know, George, the interesting thing, I mean, I used to drive by that ballpark up in Utica right off M59 there, that Jimmy John Field. It looked like a nice little venue. And I've been following. They had a no-hitter thrown in that league the other day. And so it's kind of fun to, and I agree with you. I think people do miss it, without a doubt. And I know the people definitely miss it in Toledo. They miss it in Grand Rapids. I mean, it's tough. It's not easy, believe me.
Well, I got to tell you, even though most of my memories occurred in the Florida State League, Kevin, I don't know if we ever talked about this before, but I certainly can address it now. I worked in 1987, and a guy that I'm in touch with a lot is Barry Foote. He comes on my broadcast from time to time. Barry's a really good guy. But I worked in the South Atlantic League for the Gastonia Rangers, and I'll tell you what, I had Sammy Sosa, Juan Gonzalez, and like 10 or 12 guys on that team, including managers and pitchers that went on to become major leaguers. And I guess the one thing that I had in common with the South Atlantic League, with the Gastonia Rangers and the Fort Lauderdale Yankees, is that every time I see these guys in a ballpark, they remember who I am. And you talk about instant cooperation, because it's like we build a brethren, you know what I mean? We remember when nobody knew anything about us, but all of a sudden, over the years, it's like I haven't seen you forever, but it was like yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely, absolutely know what you mean. I know, Barry Foote was my manager.
Right.
He was my manager in Fort Lauderdale. He was my manager in Albany, New York. He was my manager in AAA in Columbus, Ohio as well. And still is a good friend. And the fact is that we used to talk about it all the time. And I had a pitcher, you probably remember him, Rick Langford, who pitched for Oakland.
Yeah.
And Rick would always tell me, he say, Kevin, he says, this is, you got to remember, baseball's like a fraternity. He says it's like one big fraternity, and that's exactly right. It is. Yeah. It's a fraternity that, you have experiences with, you have people, that you have, make friendships with over the years, and, you're with them, you compete with them for 2-3 years, and then you might not see them again, and then next thing you know, you're together working together, or you're competing, against them in another club, and it is exactly that. It's kind of a big fraternity where everybody knows everybody respects the work that people have done and how hard it is to get to where you get to, but you don't forget those people that, you never forget those people that you had, on that first team in 1982, and those guys don't forget you. I had a picture on that, my first team in Fort Lauderdale in 1982. His name was Herb Fallon. He was a little left-hander out of UCLA. And Herbie wound up having a blood clot in his arm, and his career got cut short. He wound up, long story short, he wound up being the city manager in Huntington Beach, California. Well, when I had Jeremy Bonderman with the Tigers, and Jeremy wound up having a similar injury, Herb Fallon sent me a letter. And he says, I don't know if you remember me. Now, this was 25 years later. He sends me a letter. He said, I don't know if you remember me, talked about. And, of course, I did. And it was funny. I picked up the phone. I called him, and I said, Herb, let me tell you something. If it wasn't for the experience that I had with you in 1982, I wouldn't have picked up as easily on Jeremy Bonderman's symptoms as I did.
Wow.
So Jeremy Bonderman owes it to the fact that you went through what you went through, to the fact that I was able to diagnose him as soon as possible.
Well, amazingly enough, I'm in touch with Barry Foote quite a bit, actually. I've had, like I said, I've had him on, and you're right, George. And being around the big leagues as you have your whole life, and makes it even more special that you're on this broadcast, anyways. Because Kevin and I have lived it on the other side, so you can appreciate the journey a lot more of hungry ball players making it to the big leagues more so than ever. And that was when the rules were normal, not all this other gimmicky garbage that I won't get into tonight, anyways. That's for another show, but that's the fraternity that we always have. So that's just unbelievable.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's great. That is great. Wonderful, wonderful experiences in spring training, and like you said, with the minor league level, and there's people don't realize, guys, how difficult it is to make that major league roster. I mean, you could say there's been X amount of players over the time in the course of history, but think about how many of the minor leaguers, Kevin and Scott, that have never made it. They never got a step. They never got a cup of coffee, as they say. But they worked their tails off. You know what I mean? It didn't stop them from loving the game and like you said, enjoying the family atmosphere.
There's no question about it. That's why I tell people it's so hard sometimes for me to watch youth sports, because they want to make it like, oh, you got to grind this. No, you should be having fun.
Right.
You should be having fun there. The grind comes when you get up to where you make it your livelihood at that. That's when that becomes more of an issue. But even in the lower minor leagues, the percentage of players that actually make it to the big leagues is so small. You got to have fun and enjoy it, because the odds aren't in your favor. They just aren't. And at the end of the day, that's why I look at that and I'm like, I always would try to tell my own kids, I said, listen, guys, all I care about is you have a chance to play and have fun. Do the best you can. Well, that's all.
Don Mattingly told me on a recent Zoom call that it's one thing to get to the major leagues and you can hit well once you get there, but once you get to the major leagues, learning how to play the major league game versus it's like
a different game, buddy,
isn't it? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Don made sure he, and again, if there's ever a time that you're going to hear that during COVID-19, where you have shuttles going from one place to the other back and forth because there's a midnight ride. Well, obviously there's more turnover because of the unprecedented circumstances that we really are dealing with. So you have, you can appreciate a guy that gets that first major league hit more so, whether it's for a cup of coffee. The one thing I got to tell you though, Kevin, that I learned, especially early on in the game, working for a weekly paper, as a young writer, I would be able to go ahead and judge talent. I used to have my editor question me sometimes, why do you think this player is good? Because you know what we learned? Any good baseball mind is you trust your instincts. You remember this guy named Pete DeLana?
Oh, yeah, Pete DeLana, sure, from Fresno State.
Yeah,
hitting first baseman.
Well, let me tell you something. I told my editor that I wanted to write a piece. He didn't want to do it. I said, listen, Danny, I'm going to do it anyways. And what do you think happens? I wrote a story on him. Anyhow, luckily I had his dad who went ahead and said, do it anyways. I'll deal with my son later. And what happened? Pete got promoted to Double A. I think at the time, the Nashville Sounds were our Double A affiliate for the Yankees, and then he ended up going to Columbus. So
that's correct. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Pete eventually got to the big leagues for a short period of time.
Was it? Yeah, I think he had.
I believe so.
I believe
he got up with Cleveland for a short period of time.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I think. Yeah, but
interesting.
He's just a classic example, Kevin, that when you talk about instincts when it comes to judging talent, you don't know. Right. Sometimes when you judge talent, I don't know. Maybe another lifetime ago, I should have gotten a job in baseball instead of in the media. Although I love my media connections, I wouldn't have met half the people I've met anyways. But you live and die by your instincts, don't you think, Kevin? When it talks about judging talent.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you can't discount your instincts. Let's put it that way. You gotta look at guys objectively, and you've gotta listen to your instincts. You know.
Yeah.
They have to compete. The bottom line is they have to compete.
That's what I like about the Tigers. Of course, Dave Dombrowski and now Al Avila, Kevin and Scott. They've kept the great baseball minds of like Jim Leyland and Al Kaline and Willie Horton and Alan Trammell around. You know, and those guys love the game, but they also are so knowledgeable.
Right.
And I think that's great that Al Avila has, kept on that tradition that I guess Dave started here, Kevin and Scott, which is regarding the special assistants of the GM or whatever you want to call them. But, I think it's great having those guys still in the front office and as part of the game.
Well, they know how important experience is and how important, having those guys that have been around and judging talent for a long, long time.
Well, you can never
and it's important.
You can never have enough good baseball minds in an organization, number one. But number two, by having such baseball minds that you mentioned with all the other ones, it's the Tiger culture and the history. When you think of all the organizations that have come on in the last 20, 30, 40 years, the Tigers were one of the initial franchises. So this franchise has more history than the majority of what's out there, without a doubt. So it's about Tiger history plus having great baseball minds. What do you have? A rich tradition. I mean, few people realize, if you're looking in your history books, that Ty Cobb was the first player inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame. And I'm dealing with an area filled with a bunch of New Yorkers where you'll hear a lot of praise toward Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, but Ty Cobb got in there first. How do you like being on the other end of that debate, Kevin?
That's a fact. That is a fact. But, the thing is, to George's point, it's one thing to have those people and bring those people in. It's another thing to value their opinions, listen to them, and take what they have to say and run with that. Because in this day and age, we're in an interesting time in our game right now where, the talk's all about analytics. It's all about, different ways of evaluating the talent, which is great. That has a spot. That has a place as well. But don't sell out and say, oh, that's the only way, and discount the veterans, the people who've been there, those guys with the opinions. They might not necessarily match your analytics all the time, but that doesn't mean they're not right. And that's where I think the teams that are doing it the best, that will do it the best, are the teams that combine that. They take into account the analytics. They take into account, the Rapsodos, the blasts, all those types of the information. They gather as much information, but don't discount on the other side. It's not all about the numbers. Let's face the facts. We see a lot of guys that can throw hard, but can't necessarily throw strikes.
That's true.
Getting hitters out. Yes, velocity helps getting hitters out, but changing speeds gets hitters out. Getting them off their timing gets hitters out. And if the guy, all he can do is throw hard, he's not going to get a hitter off timing. And those guys will eventually get hit. And that's important. I think the teams that'll do it the best are the teams that continue to lean on the experienced guys as well as the new information that's out there for them.
Well, I'll tell you what, now that you brought both of those, you said a mouthful there, Kevin. So that's good. You talk about the fact that the Oakland A's have gotten it down with the money ball concept with Bob Melvin, I think the most underrated manager on the planet. And then
Bob Melvin's very experienced.
Oh yeah, and he makes a lot out of that payroll they have. But the one guy that comes to mind about the hard throwers that had to reinvent himself, how about Frank Tanana? You talking
No,
about
absolutely. Frank had to reinvent himself. Went from being a hard throwing left-hander. Tommy John, the surgery's named after. The interesting thing is, Tommy John. Nowadays, people get Tommy John and think they should throw as hard as they did. Tommy John didn't throw as hard as he did. He just pitched. And he pitched for a long time, and it's kind of interesting because he learned how to get guys out.
Yep. And don't forget John Smoltz. He redid his career by going to the bullpen. And John Smoltz, what a great career he had.
So, Kevin, when you look at the 2020 season statistically, I know there's probably going to be asterisks written all over it anyways, but how would you gauge it in general? I mean, obviously a 400 hitter, you don't take it seriously, but when you look at statistically, how does 2020 really get judged? I know we talk about the 7-inning doubleheader, the ridiculous, extra inning rule with a man on second base, which if thankfully it's like a lot of my past dates, it'll be a one and done. Thank God, had to throw that in there. But
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, right. I hear you, because that's a nightmare. Yeah,
I certainly hope so, because I'm not a fan.
No, I'm not either. I mean, I could probably get away. I could probably adapt to the 3-batter minimum, because if we're old school guys, the average reliever was supposed to go 2 or 3 innings, so I could get that one passed. But how do you judge 2020 overall when you put things in perspective, Kevin?
You know what? I don't know how you judge it. I really don't. Right. And I think we're basically baseball struggling a little bit right now, just in how to get the games in.
Yeah, right.
And I leave that up to other people to worry about that. I mean, I think it's kind of in some ways, I've called it organized playground, because if you didn't have enough players in Miami to play, so we're going to take our team over to Baltimore and play today. And tomorrow, Baltimore doesn't have enough players, so we're going to take it instead. We're going to go to New York and play. I just think it's very, very difficult. I don't know how they're going to manage to kind of put it together and put it into any kind of context. And of course, we have to get through it.
Right. Well,
so we still have to get through it. That's the other thing. I mean, like I say, we're doing a great job and everything's going, but we still have to adhere to the protocols. We have to do the right thing, because if you think about it, I mean, you could all of a sudden go through the whole exercise, and what happens if all of a sudden in the month of September you have 3 teams have breakout?
That's
And so I mean, we've just got to take it one day at a time. So I'll let other people worry about how they put it into context. That's for sure.
How much compassion, though, did you have when the Miami Marlins were going through all those problems? I mean, Derek Jeter went out there and admitted that, the team could have done better. And poor Don Mattingly, I realize everybody, he's the face of the franchise. But, being a part of that organization, what the area is like. They were the first ones that had to deal with it. And all of a sudden, other teams are worried about it. But, and I'm living it with these guys. I see it on every call I'm involved in.
I would say I felt exactly the same way I feel when I see a player, a team, and they have a rash of injuries. And I felt bad for the medical staff, because I knew what they're going through. They're doing the same thing we are. They're doing the same testing that we are. They're going through those same high and lows every single day. That we all are. And so you felt bad. I felt bad for them, because I knew what they were dealing with to some degree, hoping that it didn't happen to us at the same time. And so I think that's kind of the way it is, and I think that's the way probably we all feel.
Well, I should ask you if you'll ever write a book on this before we segue into George Eichorn's book. So if you ever get any free time after this insanity, would you ever write a book on this season, Kevin?
No, I'm not one that's prone to write a book on seasons or games or that type of thing. That's kind of not in my nature.
But you got me.
I enjoy talking to you about it, but as far as I leave that to other people.
Oh, well, that's okay. I had no choice, because I have to segue to George Eichorn, who's going to talk about his in a moment. But it's not like you haven't accumulated enough material through the years to do it anyways. That's for sure. So with that said, George, why don't you let Kevin Rand and everybody else know about the book that you wrote that I'm involved in?
Yes, and Kevin, Scott Morgenroth's in my book. I capture the history of Detroit sports broadcasting several years ago in my book called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, featuring the likes of Ernie Harwell, Ty Tyson, Paul Carey, Kirk Gibson, Larry Osterman, George Kell, Al Kaline. They're all in there as far as the Tigers' historical announcers, Terry Heilman. And I cover all major sports and a few other sports too. And my book is available for purchase at there's a link on the South Florida Tribune website, which has the about me and a little story about my background. And then there's a link there that you could link directly to the website to get the book, or you could go to Amazon.com also. Again, it's called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, and for $21, it's a nice historical book that I hope your listeners enjoy. Scott?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that'd be awesome. But you got great people in there. I know that.
Well, I'll tell you.
Definitely. And we talk about Scott and I, and Kevin, I know you've been influenced by so many people in your career, but Scott and I, the great love and admiration we had for Ernie Harwell is just beyond words, of course.
Wonderful man.
Yeah, could you have imagined ever working at Tiger Stadium, though, Kevin? I have to bring that up since you got used to Comerica Park.
Well, actually, I did get to experience Tiger Stadium. When I was with Florida. We went in 1997, the year we won the World Series. Yeah. We took a 2-out-of-3 series against the Tigers. In fact, Bobby Bonilla hit one over the roof at Tiger Stadium, over the transformer that Reggie hit in the All-Star game. He hit it over that.
Oh yeah.
Off Todd Jones, who we talked about it later when I came to work in Detroit. But I got to experience that, and I got to experience Ernie Harwell. Ernie, I got to meet, and in fact, one of the highlights of my career was being interviewed by Ernie Harwell for a column that he did for the Detroit Free Press, later in his life, and he interviewed me one time, and it was absolutely one of the special moments in my career.
Yeah, well, Ernie Harwell and I, like George mentioned, were really close anyhow. So, I mean, he was like an uncle to me. And I had his phone number anytime I needed him. He was there. And I always got, when I was on the road, as you know, I'm a road warrior anyway, Kevin, I would take him to the hotel and back, and it was like nothing for us. It was like just an uncle and a nephew hanging out. So that was pretty good.
Oh, sure. He was a tremendous man. He and Lou were great people.
Yeah, that was tough when he passed on for sure. Just so you know, folks, you're listening to the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgenroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Kevin's got to get used to that, the Motor City Madmouth, considering he knows me from Florida, although he knows me all over the place by now, but who would know? But
that's true.
But yeah, you're listening to Sports Exchange. Scott Morgenroth, Motor City Madmouth. We're glad to be joined by Kevin Rand, my great friend for God knows forever anyways, and George Eichorn. What can I say about him? Where we actually did a 6-hour broadcast. We've done a lot of great things at the Sports Exchange in Michigan. Just so you know, folks, you can hear this broadcast on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If I talk too fast, well, so what? I've heard that a lot of times, so I'll say it again. You can hear this broadcast on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get the podcast. Just my contact information on Twitter is at Tribune South. That's at Tribune South. Facebook, you can find us on South Florida Tribune. Instagram, South Florida Tribune. I have a YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. Kevin and I, that's our next project together. And our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. This is an online publication where we have media distribution partners, columnists. The broadcast can also be heard there. And, of course, you can email me at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And LinkedIn, Scott Morgenroth gets it done. So I know we've had a great time tonight talking with my two pals. And, I enjoy doing this when we get a chance. I know, George, you probably haven't worked with Kevin as much. But at least now tonight.
Great talking to you, Kevin. It's been a great time. I've had a great time with you tonight.
Yeah.
Well, likewise, George. It's been a lot of fun. Scott's been outstanding getting to catch up with you guys, and I really have enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too, Kevin. Every time we've gotten together, it's always been a blessing, and what can I say? So But that said, once again, George Eichorn is also representing the South Florida Tribune as well, so you can find his book on there as well. So, but meanwhile, what a great, memorable broadcast tonight, and I'm glad to be a part of it with two of the greatest people in my lifetime, Kevin Rand and George Eichorn, as always. So, on behalf of one other thing I should point out before we get off the broadcast, since we've talked a lot about COVID-19, we ask everybody out there to go out there, wear your mask, and take the necessary steps to be safe and social distance. Kevin, you live in it firsthand, so what can I say beyond that? So, on behalf of George Eichorn and Kevin Rand, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thanking you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange, and we will catch you another time. Good night, everybody.
Night.